Is your mic on?
We're on. All right. Close enough. Call the meeting to order. For the record, and again, I say this because it's recorded, if we could go for attendance. John?
Present.
Your name.
John Dewey.
Thank you.
Jess Beringer.
Mark Sanders. Trey Krause.
Linda Kaufman. All right, we have a new member. I want to welcome John. Doesn't know what he got himself into, but he has agreed to serve on the committee, and we thank you very much. You have 20 minutes for an opening statement. Oh, no, that's something else. That wasn't today. That's a different hearing. Welcome. We appreciate it very much so. So for the record, we have a quorum. I sent the minutes out. I made the one correction. I didn't send them out again because I figured you could write the E after area instead of R on the one correction that you brought up. But I distributed them. Are there any comments or questions?
Make a motion, we accept them.
Second.
Hold on. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Correspondence. I do not have any correspondence. So we're going to get really to the heart of the meeting, which is the old business, and that is to finalize our recommendations. The goal of today is to finalize all of our recommendations. What ended up being decided was that we would take a 15-minute presentation at the commissioners' meeting on December 9th. Just let me check that date. Yeah, on December 9th. And this document, once we finalize it today and I make the changes that are appropriate, will get distributed to the commissioners ahead of time so that they have this to work on. Rather than have a special meeting where this time of year he felt that perhaps they wouldn't get the attendance that they needed, it was better to do it in 15 minutes with this document as backup. So what then is important is that we capture on here the rationale, which I'll work on a little bit better so that it's a written document that they can read, and then we'll highlight things. So having said that, that's our goal today, is to get this finalized. And as I see it, there are 2 and maybe 3 issues that we have to resolve yet. One is the extension of any meter season. And with that, whether we decide to extend the permit season, if we change the meter season, if we decide then to change the permit season, because originally we'd always said for consistency's sake, we wanted them to be the same. So that's sort of a twofold. If we change the season, then we have to talk about the permits. And then the second one that we did not address yet is the whole issue with permits for residents and the 222, 2 permanent, 2 transferable, 2 scooter. So those are the only 2 that really, 2 or 3 that need to be addressed. The other thing I did as just a background is I met with the city manager last week to find out where some of these items that are administratively, or more administrative than legislative, and where they are with them. And I tried to update this. Many of them are in the works, many of them are being implemented, some are not. So what I tried to do is address it, whether they're partially or in the works. And then the comment simply was, need to be implemented, because we talked about that. And we will make sure we go through every single one of these before we leave today, but I just want to kind of make sure that my recollection is what everybody else's. So, having said that, before we get started, is there any comments or questions? So, do we want to tackle, I recommend that we tackle the 222 permit first, and then go to the meter season, because I think that's going to be the longer one.
Let's warm up with that.
Yeah, warm up. So, and this is, in some, for the audience, the press, new, whatever, but the idea of the limiting of the 222 goes back to our thought that putting a little bit more parity, I guess, across the board, that currently, if you are a resident, or even a non-resident, if you are a property owner, you can get as many permits as you have cars. So if you own 5 cars, you can get 5 permits. And that clogs the streets up even more. In addition to that, one of the things that we looked at was that any property owner, even if you aren't even here, like you could live in Lewis and own property here, and you're getting a free permit. And so we looked at it and said that we're probably giving away a pretty big asset. You know, they're worth $250 a piece, and we're giving them away to just about anybody, 5 or 6 or 7 people on deeds, and they're all getting permits. I tried to determine from the city how many houses actually have multiple, and they weren't able to give that information at this point. So we don't really have a data point for it. But that was our thinking before, is that it seemed fair that if we were imposing higher rates and other things on the business community, that the residents had to do a little bit of compromise also by limiting how many permanent. It didn't mean that they couldn't get any. It simply meant that they would have to purchase anything above the 2 permanent and 2 transferable. So that was the discussion. It was not implemented last year. It was on the board, it was being passed, and I don't know, at the last minute, it was sort of not.
Well, don't you think there was some the public was confused to what,
Yeah.
people didn't realize that they were still going to get their 6 freebies. They thought we were gonna charge for all of them. I think we all heard that the public, even here, didn't understand what so I think maybe we just need to propose it again clearer.
And there were 1 or 2 people that were like, but I have 5 cars and I want all 5 free.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I guess the thought on that is, you know, if you only get 2 permits, perhaps you'll use your driveway a little bit more, which was one of the rationale, and, you know, share the cost of them
It's really just how many they're getting for free.
for free. Yeah.
They can get by as many as they want. And they didn't understand that last time.
And remember, part of this was sort of that, you know, again, the challenge we had last time, and I'm going to open my remarks to the commissioners this time by saying, please don't pass everything piecemeal. Either pretty much do it all or don't do any of it. Because that part was also in conjunction with us saying to the rental houses and the hotels that you're no longer going to get that $30 permit. And that was implemented, but the implementation to the residents wasn't. So it didn't seem like it went across as a very fair process. Any comments? I know it's new, we're throwing you into the fire.
Right, and between my partner and I, we own 4 vehicles. And we also, when we built the house, a 4-bedroom house, we built an extended driveway. So I can park 3 cars on that lot. So I understand the logic, and I tried to follow this discussion last summer or last spring, whenever this was all going on. And among the equity issues that I think need to be considered is equity for those of us who plan in advance, built our driveways to accommodate the extra vehicles, and I feel to some degree that folks like us who planned ahead are now, in a certain sense, being punished because we have 6-bedroom multiplexes that you can barely get 2 cars parked in the driveways.
Yes, so there's both sides of that.
Right.
You know, part of one of the at one point we had talked about even tackling that issue, which this committee chose not to, and tackling meaning increasing the amount of spaces required for houses over 4 bedrooms. We chose not to at this point. However, there's a lot of older houses that don't have the ability to do, so it's both sides of that. You know, our house is an older house, we've got a porch in front, we couldn't add any more, so that's all we can get. There's some in country clubs that don't have any, so I think it really just comes down to what's fair. Do we feel that there needs to be a limit? Is that helping the city from a financial standpoint, and also does it help control on street where people will put 4 or 5 cars on the street, or 2 or 3? I shouldn't use 4 or 5, but 2 or 3.
I think the 222 is appropriate.
I think we need
If
to
someone
try it
wants
again.
more, they can purchase one, right? How much
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
how much is it fixed? And
$250 for the permanent.
For permanent, and how much for the $275 for the transferable? Is that what it is?
$225. Yeah, $225.
$225 for transferable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, $250 for transferable?
And fixed is,
Should be the same.
And the fixed one is $225? Okay, I had them backwards.
how many, so when we send out 2, we send out 2 of each, right? So each house gets 4?
No, no, no.
No, you said
Right
no.
now, you get as many, like if you
We're
have,
proposing 2 of each.
we're proposing that, give us your 2 cars that have the permanent, because they would still have the license plate.
Right.
Here's your 2 transferable. And if you have, keep in mind, we recommended and they approved the free ones to the scooters. So here's your 2 scooter ones. Now, one of the comments I had from someone was, well, if I don't have 2 scooters, can I get 2
Yeah.
free? I don't think it was a trade-off. It was just a, you know, 2. So yes, they can still buy them.
And again, I think that was appropriate. I think we made the appropriate decision last time.
Yes.
I just don't think we explained it well enough.
Well, okay, and so, John, to your point, you know, to kind of debate that a little bit, which I think is a valid point, you know, what we were trying to do when we came up with all of these is compromise and share the responsibility for trying to get the parking into control. And part of this was, okay, you know, if I have 4 cars and I have 4 permits, am I putting all 4 out on the street and saving the driveway and creating a problem?
And that's what's happening often.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And so we felt that, you know, either you're gonna buy the $250, in which case, or $225, whichever it is, and you know, put it on the street, or maybe you're just gonna consider putting it on the driveway and taking one less space.
We ultimately would like to see people carpool and just bring fewer cars.
Well, that would
The
be,
current situation, as you well know, is they bring 5 cars for a 3-bedroom house because every kid has their car and the boyfriend has a car and everybody else. So we're hoping that by charging them for the additional permit, they'll think twice about bringing 5 cars.
the other thing I've said over and over, and I fundamentally have as a resident, taxpayer and all that, if you've got some of these homes that aren't really residential homes, they're rentals, businesses, and they're owned by, you know, a conglomerate of 6 or 7 people who live in Milton and Lewis and whatever, they're getting something for free that, you know, really should probably have a fee attached. And I know that that can be controversial, but.
And keep in mind, not to rehash it all over again, but we found out they were being abused. People were selling them on Craigslist. You know, they were getting a free one and selling it for $100 on Craigslist.
And we did.
So, you know, people were being abused. It really was.
So I'd like a recommendation on this one so we can move forward.
I don't really have a horse in this race, but I mean, I do feel, just from being an observer, not being intimately involved, all the arguments that we've looked at, positive, negative, left, up and down, right, and all that. I think that the 222 is fair with the ability that you can buy and purchase more. I don't think it's, I think it's a controlling, it's a way to try and control the neighborhood. It also gets, you know, it's getting harder and harder to park around, even when you have, you know, even with your when you live there. I mean, it's everybody's starting to creep further in, and I think the more people that are out on the street, the more crowded it's going to get, and the more animosity. So, I mean, I you know, very lightly, I agree with the 222. I don't really have that much.
And for the lack of knowing the numbers given by the city, how can we really adjust?
Yeah.
So it seems only fair that we stay with what we proposed last year until we have obvious reasons to change it.
Is that a motion?
I'll
Yes.
second it. Second it.
One other thing I would add is that we would tie in a educational program with the real estate agents. I've brought this up before, when you go to Florida, you get a call 2 weeks before, well, when you first signed the contract a year before, they say there are only 2 parking places for this property. And then you get a phone call the week before and say, do not bring more than 2 cars. And, you know, you'd be an idiot to violate that. We don't go there.
I think that's one of our recommendations we had down there on public relations, of just trying to get people to understand. But, you know, that, what you're talking about is probably phase 3 if we have another year of this committee. And those are more of the, I don't want to, more of the restrictive kind of
Zoning.
things.
Zoning items.
Yeah.
I think we need to have a representative from the communications department at our meetings. I mean, this is the one that's the most incendiary, almost the most incendiary.
Well,
So that they understand what we're saying, so that it can be communicated out there. Because really, it's just, we're left to the hearsay
Yeah.
with all of this.
and that was one of our recommendations.
And I understand when somebody arrives with 3 extra cars and they weren't told, they say, well, nobody told me. I understand their frustration.
And the contracts are being written now.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
So,
request
once
this
again,
now,
this
We're
is-
probably a year off anyhow.
We're a year off
Yeah.
into that for the future, but for right now, we're talking about the residential one. So I have a motion,
Yes.
second, Mark, any other discussion?
I'd just like to make a quick comment before we move on to a vote, and that is listening to this discussion, hearing more of the background, particularly around some of the abuses that have been discovered regarding the system, as well as hearing more about the logic was also to exercise some equitable restrictions upon homes that are owned by multi-owner LLCs, and goodness knows how many individuals within those LLCs are now qualifying for these permits. As a private homeowner, I'm willing to accept some inconvenience as a part of an effort to address that larger problem.
You bring up a great point, thank you, that's a great comment, in that, when we presented this last year, we did, I thought, a pretty good presentation on the whys of everything, because I'm a firm believer that you have to have the why. Unfortunately, after that meeting, it was dropped and there wasn't any public relations or anything. So one of the things in the 15 minutes, and I'm going to stress, is that these are recommendations, there's reason behind it, but that the city can't just debate them at a workshop without having the explanation each time, because the frustration was that each time they got to one, there was all of this outcry and people didn't understand the whys, and before you know it, they were overwhelmed with people against things before they even understood why. And so that's one of the things we'll try and push for. Try. All right, having said that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And one, just housekeeping, can we just change the wording on it from, it says with any additional requiring the purchase? How about we just say available for purchase? So that the word require looks like
I like that.
available for purchase.
Thank you.
That-
Got it. Okay, now, any comments from the audience on that particular item? Okay. So we're into the big one, the extended meter season. We had originally proposed May 1st through September 30th. What was adopted was keeping it at Memorial Day and extending it for, I don't even know, a week, or, do you remember? It was like some, it was
Yeah,
some,
it was, we got another week out of it, I think.
2
yeah,
weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Oh, you mean originally?
I think it was 2 weeks.
The meter season, how
Oh.
long did it get extended last year?
Oh,
2 weeks?
originally,
2 weeks.
Permits.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Meters
did
don't. No.
the meters didn't at all, just the permits, that's what I
Permits,
thought.
Oh, okay.
So all they did was
Right.
they brought
made
the-
them to match.
made them
That's
to
right.
match.
That's great.
So we had originally said May 1st through September 30th. I'd like to hear discussion on it. The last meeting, we talked about potentially weekends in October. I don't know that we addressed May, although we did talk a little bit about weekends. So one proposal that we had talked about was weekends in May, meters June, July, August. Now it's mid-September, maybe to the end of September, and then weekends again in October. Or any combination of those. So I'm throwing it out there for whatever we think we need to talk about.
Since we last met, I think the response from several businesses with the local season and the meterless Monday, I am for closing the meters Memorial Day Tuesday. Memorial Day would be the last day, or Labor Day, excuse me. Labor Day would be the last meter day. I'm just, the response from the public, the response from the businesses, I mean, we've got to listen and hear. Having gone around, I did not meet with too much resistance for Saturdays. So I'd love to see maybe Saturdays during some of the shoulder seasons to keep the parking moving a little bit instead of having it become
So you're suggesting even pulling it back 2 weeks?
Yep, definitely. For the
This is
businesses.
just meters,
Just meters, just for
in
the,
the core, the three
yeah, but
streets.
even, I mean, I don't.
All
know-
meters, they do.
All,
I think
okay.
all, because I don't think it does anything really.
But then we'd have to do the permits. You couldn't
What's
do one and not the
What's
other.
the reason, Trey? What's the reason they're giving you?
The outcry from the businesses and the public, that's
But
why. And
is-
isn't that what we're serving?
Well, yes, and I'm gonna say it over and over and over again, meters create the turnover. So
To have them during the week is ridiculous.
what we're effectively saying is that we don't need turnover through September.
During the week, no.
And I don't know that I agree with
My
that.
argument to that would be the bathrooms are still open though, when the boardwalks are still open, we're providing services
Bathrooms
to
are open
those
now.
people. Right, but we're not getting paid for them then, it's like, we're
Well,
providing a public service then.
You
The rea-
mentioned,
but
you
the
mentioned the
reason-
public and the businesses. You left out the residents.
but it's,
As-
I'm
as
talking,
a
I mean,
equal
so how is it gonna affect the residents?
being parked in. Much more after season, every weekend.
There's
There's a
residents and meters.
festival or of
There's the same-
celebration every
There's
single
gonna be the
weekend.
same number of people. It's just, what you're doing is, you're trading customers who are parking in your streets, and the turnover that's gonna be happening on your streets versus the lack of turnover on Rehoboth Avenue. You're gonna just switch that out. You're gonna have turnover on Rehoboth, when Wilmington and Baltimore, and then you're gonna have more long-term parking happening in your neighborhoods instead of having all these people driving through your neighborhood looking for parking who are just there to visit our town.
Well, one thing to remember in all of this is, I would be very surprised if the majority of the business community, I'm sure you're hearing people say that to you, Trey, I don't doubt that, but I doubt that the majority of the business community would agree with that.
Which part of it?
Okay,
Which part?
Pulling them off it.
Ending the meters?
yeah, I think they do not want to lose the business that they have. And there's always this conflict between, is it better for it to move them out of the meters or to leave them in the meters? That's the decision. But the other thing that happens in those months is, it's not, I have one event in that time frame. The one event that I do have in June, the meters are already in effect. Okay, doesn't impact it. But there are many, many activities that aren't chamber that happen in this town in the spring and fall.
Well, the parking is already restricted where there would be meters on that Saturday anyway, so.
Let's
I
not
don't-
mix Saturday with,
Yeah,
Okay, well, but your event,
just extended. They don't want it, they don't want that.
I don't wanna mix Saturdays with the extension.
well,
Let's,
the extension though,
Just wait. Let's address the fact that currently the meters go until the middle of September.
Mhm.
I'm hearing you say you're recommending even pulling them back to Labor Day. Let's not even talk
No,
about,
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
not even talk about weekends, let's just talk
Right,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I have to say, creating turnover is so critical that if we recommend that, we're basically saying we're not busy in September because we don't need turnover. And my argument to that is, if we don't need meters for turnover in September because it's not busy, then I've said this before, take the meters out the whole summer. And I say that facetiously, but not really facetiously, that, they're to create turnover. And so someone would have to convince me that September isn't as busy as June.
Well,
Well, you can look at Baltimore Avenue every day during the week in those first 2 weeks, and there's not a soul.
September and October have more visitation by traffic count alone.
But
than
they're
June.
not, but
Wait a
they're
minute,
not parking.
Then May and June. May and June would have the less visitation. September and October, the higher. A lot of that is event-related, a lot of it is schools let out related, but that's the way, that's the numbers.
Can I tell you?
During the week, Baltimore Avenue is empty when the meters are up. Wilmington.
We have the
empty when
shortest
meters
season
are up.
now.
Don't you think, I speak for myself as a homeowner, we'd be outraged if we went back to that because suddenly we're giving away more. We've just had a 50% increase in our taxes. Now we're giving away free
So have
parking
I.
for 2 months, right? But
I did too.
I don't think it's the time to give away revenue.
And my taxes are a hell of a lot
I know,
more than
I
yours.
know.
And mine went up with the
I'm just
assessments,
saying,
and then they went
I
up
just
with the
think
50%.
The Board of Commissioners would get a huge backlash if we went the other direction. Maybe we don't go further.
$6,000 in
right?
taxes now.
Well,
Okay, I mean,
Okay, we're not talking.
I know that, I'm just, so this is not a money, this is not really a money thing, this is how to balance.
How does it help?
We're
Tell-
losing businesses here in town, okay,
How
now
does
I'm gonna talk as a representative of Main Street, okay, we're losing businesses like you can't imagine. They're coming in and they're turning over faster than they ever have because people think it's one panacea. They remember the old Rehoboth. Well, this is not the old Rehoboth anymore. It is next to impossible to eke out a living in this. And you listen to them, they wouldn't celebrate the meters going down as much and have such huge celebration if it, and create a whole program of events if it wasn't.
So why not
Initiative.
give it away all summer? I'm gonna continue that argument.
Because in the summer, I look out Baltimore Avenue, and sometimes I can't get out of my parking lot because I got cars looking for parking spaces.
So September's not
In
summer.
September, during the week, there is not a soul on Baltimore Avenue. Now, Rehoboth Avenue is jammed, still, at least the first block and half of the second. The rest of Rehoboth is not. Wilmington is empty because you gotta pay, and there aren't that many cars wanting to pay, because you can just park in front of your house for free.
I'm struggling. I can't support. I mean, I feel that it should go to the end of September. I mean, we've got the shortest season on record. I think Lewis just pulled their meters November 15th.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine the chamber supporting extending the meters because that's not what I'm hearing.
Extending?
Yeah.
That's what we heard, I mean,
No,
right
wait,
after
wait.
that
Just
meeting.
what did you, the chamber wouldn't
No, I don't.
extending, but to 2 weeks.
Right.
But would they support, or how would they feel about moving it back 2 weeks even?
I haven't asked that directly, but any extension of the meters that has ever come
After the
up
Belmore
over
meeting.
years has been, leave it alone.
After the Belmore meeting.
What about
I was
weekends?
accosted, okay? And it came out of it is we need to get, as soon as Labor Day is over, we gotta get rid of the meters. That's what came after me, okay?
That's
And we
not what they
made,
said.
and we went and did all this other stuff based on that meeting. And so I'm just tying it to that meeting, is there was another part of this, which was the extension of the meetings. They
I
do
just-
not feel,
So the belief is that this would help, answer that question, this would help what? Why are we doing that? Why would we do that?
which,
Pulling it back till
Why
Labor
are we
Day.
doing that?
Who are we helping?
You're helping,
the locals.
you're helping
People that
the,
support us all year, 2/3 of the year around.
So I'm gonna go back to this. So meters are for turnover. And so if turnover isn't
They're also
important,
for restriction too.
if
And they're
turnover's
acting
not
as a
important,
restriction
then
during
let's
the
make a
week.
recommendation to do away with the meters completely.
Yeah.
Then the locals can come year
Because
round.
there's not a demand like there is when you're saying, let's just get rid of them. I think that's,
you ask who is it helping if we took the meters down right after Labor Day? It helps the tens of thousands of new residents in eastern Sussex County who will come in and park and stay all day and go to the beach, which is a wonderful
They'll stay
time in
3
September and
hours.
October. So it's
this way they can only stay
it's
3 hours.
self-defeating. I mean,
No, because
there won't be parking for your customers.
You know, I could
they
compromise.
will be customers. Because not every day is a beach day.
I could compromise and not extend it, although I still believe extending it, but I can't support pulling it back. And I also think weekends in the rest of September and October is something that we should look at.
I don't have a
May
problem,
I
I don't have a
comment
problem
about
with
that?
weekends. It's during the week.
I'd like to support what Randy sent as an email this morning from Mexico.
I didn't see it.
Right, that's why I brought it up.
Can you-
And his point was that we should extend it longer weekends into the fall,
I don't disagree with that.
quite a bit longer in the fall.
If you do
Which-
that
which
with
should
all
we-
of the events, then that time limit is definitely going to impact it.
Say that again, what he said. I was trying to find the email while you were talking. I apologize.
I just made a quick note, but I can pull it up and read it
Yeah, why don't you-
to be fair to him.
Regarding
And
extending
us.
I
meters,
have it.
I am in favor of extending weekends into fall. I think for simplicity, it needs to be both Saturday and Sunday. That was the only thing that he mentioned as far as that was
Yeah,
concerned.
I agree.
What they say is,
So what I'm-
don't take my fall weekends away.
So you're against this?
They're big. Yes, from what I'm hearing, yes.
For who you
Yes.
represent, I understand, I'm just asking.
Yes. Don't take my fall
When-
weekends away.
How many events go, let's see, 10, 11, 12, how many events go past 1 o'clock? Maybe 3?
Well, you've got everything from jazz, you've got sidewalk sales, you've got all kinds of stuff.
But there's also,
September and October.
there's also people who live here,
Yeah,
and
I know
they
that.
are third fiddle when it comes to parking.
So the reason would be it may not push them into the residential neighborhood if you do
Well,
that.
the permits would have to match continuously. That's, that would be the difficult part. How can you do
Not for
permits on
weekends.
weekends?
No, you don't.
I don't think for- I could
Because all the
probably,
other I just think it's the meters for Rehoboth, Wilmington, Baltimore, that commercial zone for the weekends.
I wouldn't be able to vote for it to go backwards. I could vote for it to go forwards, or I could vote for it to stay the same.
I can't go back.
You guys, have an opinion?
I wouldn't want to pull back from the current.
No.
So I'm hearing a little bit, we'll get back to that then, but what about weekends? I mean, it,
They're gonna go
So-
crazy.
so I guess the frustration, and I'll be honest about this, is one of our missions was to find a way to create more parking without building parking.
Mhm.
If we don't create turnover, we're failing in that. And so if we don't make changes, we are effectively saying status quo is okay.
Was anybody complaining about lack of turnover this past weekend and the weekend before? So why are we pushing
We're in
to
November.
create,
Well,
but even in October? I mean, no one,
I'm just
I didn't
saying,
hear
if
any,
we-
I didn't really hear
if-
too
if
many
we don't
complaints
make
about
changes,
turnover in.
Then we're saying the status quo is acceptable.
Status quo may be a compromise.
That's the way
Yeah.
I see it.
I don't think it's, everybody's equally unhappy, so maybe it's a good idea.
Well,
Boy, that's a statement. Let me write that one down. Yes, and if you would come up to the mic just
Introduce yourself.
and introduce yourself, thank you.
Yeah, it's Mike Strange, and in theory, I'm going to be a member of this committee.
Oh,
But I think they still have something else to do.
Your blood test didn't come back.
Well,
I didn't get anything on it, so,
yeah, that's what was weird. But
Okay.
anyway, so
I
I came here
apologize.
as a person.
perfect.
Anyway, Mike Strange, Forest Oakley, I am a resident. I'm also on the planning commission. We've been working on the CDP, which this is part and parcel of that. But you made a comment, and I think it's very interesting. We have intelligent meters. And if you want to assign physical areas or physical days, if you want to do it only on weekends, that capacity exists to come up with a modified approach. And so rather than, what I'd say is fixating on a specific where there's so many different variables, is probably assessing based on the numbers, and it may in fact be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, or Friday after, whatever. Because even in the off-season, to your point, and I'd make a trek in looking at it, after you leave Rehoboth Avenue, there's plenty of parking spaces available, almost all the time. On the other hand, if you go at the
Wait a minute. During the summer?
no, not during the summer.
Oh, okay,
Forget
I
it's
just-
impossible during the summer, unless you get in there really early.
I just
which is
wanted to
what
make
do
sure I
before
understand.
10 o'clock. When you look at the off-season, for example, and I'll consider that, except for when we have special events on the weekend, the off-season is getting shorter from a calendar standpoint. But if you go on Wilmington Avenue or Baltimore Avenue, and you're going there earlier in the day, or even in midday, it's fairly vacant. But the core, Rehoboth Avenue, and what's interesting is now, because we have so much development on the entrance to Rehoboth Beach, if you come out here on a Saturday night, it's mobbed at the other end of town, on Rehoboth Avenue, and much lighter here towards the boardwalk. So we've got spatial issues related to parking. And I think we can't magically create more, although, to your point, one of your mission and ours in the CDP is how do you create more parking without building a parking garage or building some other facilities. and there are ways to do that. But I think since we have intelligent meters, that might be one way to address all of the issues that we're talking about here as to when they're in effect. And in many cities, you will see much more urban than we are, but we're a small town by the sea that unfortunately has big city problems for a few months of the year, is you see signage, electronic signage coming in. It says, parking meters in effect from 9 a.m. to whatever. So you have full knowledge, and we only have limited access into the city. So we have tremendous control over being able to notify people what's going on. So I would recommend, as a resident, that whether or not I have to pay or not during the off-season, I think it would be viable to extend whatever recommendation may be, but I would vote for an intelligent approach so that I'm sort of biased, at least from all the research that I've done and looking at all your notes, is the weekends as we get out of the prime season. What those weekends should be, I think that determines more research, but it may very well go on for quite some time because, as an example, all the restaurants, as you come into town on a Saturday night, they're packed.
Excuse me, the meter extension on Saturdays, I think should just be to like 10 to 5. Number one, I don't think it should be $3 an hour, and I don't think that it should be time limit. But I think that just having the employees to push off of Rehoboth, because that's what happens, is all the employees park on Rehoboth Avenue, and there is no parking and there is no turnover. Those days, we don't need turnover during the week. We don't. It's actually the meters restrict business and in case it's
So let's do this. Let's approach it from a different angle.
for those 2 weeks.
Let's approach it from a different angle. I think what we're really wrestling with is what is off-season and what, I hear words, off-season, peak, whatever. In my mind, the season is really July, August, and September, to be honest. June is hit or miss. June is hit or miss weather, kids are still in school, but Memorial Day always is kickoff of summer. We're a resort town. It's some ceremonial kind of date. But I think for us, if we're really gonna do this logically, and I wanna make a point that it's an emotional issue, and I understand where people love the meterless Monday and all that, but if our job is to do good parking management, then we have to say during the peak times, we want turnover. Non-peak times, we don't need it. Okay. If we agree with that premise, then what we have to do is say, what are the peak times and the non-peak times? We can't start arbitrarily picking dates and saying this is some magic time.
Okay.
So let's at least debate that topic. I mean, do we agree that during the peak times, we need to have turnover?
Right.
More than 3 hours?
Well,
We already.
we already
Meeting,
addressed
we
that.
went 4.
We're 4.
We're 4 now.
I think the way to define it is to look at the cost of hotel rooms. Okay, middle of August to the end of August, hotel rooms go down in price because that's when things slow down. They slow down around August 15th during the week.
It's the school time. It's when
That's
school's
right.
in and out.
So essentially, when you say the season goes through to September, not really.
Oh, I think
Not during the week.
it may be cheaper, but it's as busy.
Well,
It's
why is it
different
cheaper?
people. It's
Why
different
is it
people.
cheaper?
Because
Yeah, it is different.
It's
It's
cheaper
different
because
people.
the
It's a
demand
different
is
group.
less.
There's a lot of people
So I
here,
think
but-
if you look at the hotel rates, that's
Not
gonna
the same
tell
people.
you what's peak and what's not peak. And you'll find that on weekends in September, yes, it's up. During the week, that's why a lot of people come down that normally might come during the summer. They'll come during that time because I got vendors that'll come down in September because they can get a room for $100. You can find a $100 room in August? No. But September you can.
But you're full of your shoppers that come in for the day. So September and October have more visitation.
Not during the week as much.
but the chamber's telling us it is, so I think this comes down to peak times. I mean, what do we think is the peak
Well,
time?
It does, but to build on something that Mike said, keep in mind signage and keeping things simple is important too. We can't have one Saturday and not the next Saturday, then the next Saturday go back on again. How are they gonna know? You know, I think we either do all Saturdays or no Saturdays, but
Well, you do all
we don't do
Saturdays.
this Saturday and
No,
that Saturday.
You don't, it's just you go until. you
Every
pick the end-
Saturday
you
until
pick the end date.
October 30th or something like that.
Whatever the
So we
end
need
date
to
is.
keep it as simple as we can.
I'm still,
Veterans Day weekend was jam-packed.
I'm still in favor, and I'm gonna keep throwing this out and then debate it back, but I'm in favor of extending them until the end of September and then weekends through October. But I'm willing to compromise and keep it where it's at.
I would agree with that. And then for next year, we would somehow try to get statistics from the police or from somewhere on what event draws how many people. And then with, how you so well said, we could adjust meters on a weekend to adapt to road races or.
Well, we don't have
CU
those smart meters yet.
I mean, we already have cones going on.
The meters we have don't do
Parking
that.
for those
Okay.
events is
So
already.
it would take a year or two,
taken
I
care of.
imagine.
Hang
to
on, one at a time.
finance them.
One at a time. I think we have to, I mean, I feel pretty strongly about it, is that we need meters for turnover during peak time. I think the debate is what's the peak time? Because if we don't need it for peak time, then I'm gonna say it again. Let's recommend that we get rid of the meters completely.
And we do need it for peak time.
Then that's the
And
big
I'm
thing.
gonna say again, as my point has been since I've been on this committee, that we provide services to the public every day, we need to be reimbursed for those services.
Meters,
Absolutely agree.
in addition to creating turnover, meters
Beach
are
badges.
user fees.
To the tune of $55
Beach
million.
badges,
Something.
Yes.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
right now, the meters are user fees also.
Sure, they are.
Mhm.
That's my
Yeah.
point.
What's,
So the compromise is to keep it the same.
I'm gonna go just barometer wise, if I look out and the beach block of Baltimore Avenue in September is empty, that's not peak time.
What would be the harm in leaving it the same for a year till you get these other changes made? You've got new signage coming in. You may change some of these other things. And see,
we could,
check it. I mean, because
we could. I
So-
just,
a lot of changes in a very short time, and it did not work as well as it could have this year.
We got a lot more communicating to do.
well, we have more communicating and more coordination because we did pieces of it, not all of it. And that was challenging.
Yes.
I still say that the 3-hour would have been successful if we had done other things plus communicating it. So, we're obviously divided. I'm gonna ask, I keep the poor new guy.
You're deciding
I'm gonna go to,
Just so that you know,
R.I.P. Joe
this
Hill,
is-
he's voted no once before.
This is the way we debate, which is good. I mean, anybody that ever says that this committee is like a rubber stamp to anything hasn't tuned in, because we have good debates. But, I could agree that maybe we don't change it at all if the other stuff's implemented, but I'd like to hear your thought.
Well, my first thought is that this is tame compared to the professional meetings that I sat in a public school system. So I'll just let that rest there for a moment or two. I agree with some of what Trey has to say in that, and this is new for me as a recent retiree, there are no cars on Baltimore or Wilmington, Delaware, midweek after Labor Day. It's very, very light. You might have a few people that are parking there for access to the beach on the best days. But really, I was surprised. Spending more time down here in September than I have in the past, I was really surprised at that difference. But then you get to the weekends. However the committee chooses to define weekends, whether that's Friday through Sunday or Saturday, and that's a whole nother discussion. My approach to it at the moment would be to, because it was such an effort to get people trained up, the public trained up for the current end of the meter season, to consider leaving that current end in place for 7-day enforcement, because it was 7-day up until that point. I also recognize that there is a lot of competition for parking, particularly on Rehoboth Avenue. I'm a little less aware of what's going on Wilmington and Baltimore, Saturday during the day and Sunday during the day. Because if the weather's nice, I'm on the beach. And if the weather's not nice, I'm out at the outlets. So I'm not paying quite as much attention to what's going on in those streets at that time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there has been some discussion of keeping the current end date for 7-day enforcement in mid-September and considering extending the meter season on Saturday and Sunday. That is something that I'm interested in. I think the devil's always in the details, how late into September, how much into October. That I think I would like to see more information from people. I know it's hard to get data, but I'd like to see more information, if possible, on what the need for turnover is on weekends after mid-September.
And, you know, we could recommend baby steps, which is keep the meters where they are and do Saturdays through September or October. I mean, I'm throwing out.
Doesn't that require meters that we don't have yet? Smarter meters?
No,
No, because
June,
I think
June's saying it does.
no, because you just don't have to have them enforced. I mean,
Right.
it's just,
But boy,
that's,
that gotta confuse the public when
Wil-
the meters there that we're not
Wilmington-
enforcing.
Doesn't Wilmington and Baltimore, don't they now have the kiosks? So those, and Rehoboth, that's kind of what we're talking about, not the meters. I'm not speaking to the meters on like Delaware and
The
Maryland.
secondary meters, yeah.
On those poles, the ones still on poles, I'm not
So the
speaking about
proposed-
that for the weekend, but even the but no limit. See, that's the thing, I don't think there should be a limit, but I think there should be, the limit should be how much you want to pay to park, or if you
Well,
want to
that's
go
how
a
it
block or
is.
two over.
That's how it is on the.
No, I'm talking about
Right.
Wilmington and Rehoboth.
but then why do we have a limit at all then? See, I'm coming back to
Because there's two
consistency.
different,
Well,
You're arguing two different worlds. It's like, it's okay
they are
for,
two different worlds. I mean, I live in my world, you guys all live in your other world, so just, I see it every single day, you know, and it's dead during the week from Labor Day on.
Telling you that
Today,
you're
it's dead.
pushing your customer away, your visitor away, because it's too complicated. And we're gonna change it
If there's no
again.
parking, how is it not complicated? Then you just
No,
say
there is
Saturdays,
parking.
there's,
There is
Saturday
parking.
is a meter day.
8 weeks of the year, you have a problem.
say
And
that
I
again?
can tell you in front of my building, all summer long,
I'm not sold on weekends,
there was parking.
but I'm the Labor Day end.
I'm not in favor of pulling it back. I mean, I think,
I don't see what those 2 weeks do. I mean, those 2 weeks are, and even the next 2 weeks, I don't see what that does to anything.
I guess I still believe September is not the shoulder season anymore. I think September's
It's
is,
not.
is as busy as
Yes.
August.
The weekends. You've got 52 weekends a year is what you're dealing with here. And it's only if there's bad weather, really, that they're not here on the weekend. They're here, the key is pulling them into town, and it's difficult to pull them into town if it's difficult, if it's confusing, if it's, they don't know which way to go. I mean, I've never, ever, I've said this before, I can't say it enough. I had no complaints over the price. Every other complaint was over the length of time and whether they're coming in for dinner, and I know what the stats say, but I'm telling you, if you come into Rehoboth for dinner and you have to wait for your table, and then you go in, you have to go move your car. They're not coming back. They tell me, I'm not coming back.
Well, when we addressed that, we went to
We
4
settled
hours.
that last meeting, hopefully.
So that limit is an issue, and the fact that different streets are different ways is an issue. Those were the two top complaints. And there was, of course, an issue with the permit, the parking meters themselves, but basically, it was the extending, just like we heard in the meeting. What I heard in that meeting, I don't know what they said to you afterwards, and what I hear on my, when they come in or they're calling me is, the business community is not happy with it, you're not happy with it as a resident.
I didn't hear
Let
about
them park.
residents.
If they stay there, they're not gonna come in the neighborhood. And an employee is not gonna pay $3 an hour.
I mean, we addressed going to 4 as a compromise. We addressed that last meeting, so,
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
yeah, it's okay. So, I mean, we felt that 4 still created the turnover, so I'm still back on,
I get you from 6 PM to 10 PM and the meters turn off. So
Yeah.
if you park at 6 o'clock, you're good for the rest of the day. You don't have to.
and so that's why we compromised on the 4 hours, because even if you wait, because most people aren't taking advantage of the happy hour, and if they do, they're in and out quicker. If they're waiting in, an hour for a table or 2,
Yeah.
and then we made it to 4 hours, they don't have to worry about it.
And we did, in the very beginning, that was the recommendation that the chamber made, at least go to 4
Right.
hours. So it's worth a try.
And that's what,
Which is what we did.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and what if we just don't act on this until next year, see how things go with the new signs and so forth? As-
Well, I mean,
what I
that's
think.
certainly one of the recommendations we can have is
Leave it be
to do no change for next year
Let's get
on
those
this, on
signs
this
up.
particular item.
on this
Right,
item.
Right.
I don't know what to do, Trey, I'm telling you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is
Then
what is
readdress
those
it.
2
That's
weeks,
the
is that, I mean,
electronics.
how important are those 2
Yeah.
weeks, and then how
Yeah.
important is the next 2
And
weeks?
see what the problems
Well,
with the
I'm- again,
difference area.
I don't see that we have, Lewis has definite parking, I mean, it's hard to park there, period, every single day of the year. There just isn't that much parking. Now, they had a big problem because they were closed. They had parking lots closed. I had a long conversation with Betsy about this. They have a much different situation. We have such an abundance of parking past Labor Day that these other places don't have.
I guess I don't see the abundance after Labor Day. Okay, so let's kind of,
It's there, it's there.
I'm in-
I'd love to get statistics of what the parking, how many unique visitors or unique parkers are there
the only way to do that is
post-Labor Day?
with a true turnover study, which is gonna cost the city.
Feasible, yeah.
Well, isn't that, wasn't that just an extension of the data that we got for the last meeting?
No, I mean, if you're asking what you're asking, that's a true, in the vernacular of the parking world, that's a turnover
Well, we
study.
had that. We had how
It's
many
a feasible.
transactions and how many we can get from,
No, how many spaces turnover? I mean, to me, it would be important to say, are we turning spaces over?
no, just whatever we had last meeting. Remember that spreadsheet we had?
have it.
Why can't we just look at that and compare September, the 2 weeks in September to pick 2 weeks during the peak time? Not the permit, but
that's a
there was the
permit.
meter, there was a bigger one that had
It was
all the
one,
meters. That had it all rolled
I
up.
think I did a summary on,
This one?
Yeah, that was, that's the one that you had worked on, yes.
but mine was permits, not meters.
Yeah.
There was a meter one because it had Park Mobile and the other one.
This
went on
one.
Yeah,
there
well,
too.
that was the city one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I'm
I
talking
know.
about.
Yeah.
So why can't we look at the 2, it didn't include the 2 weeks, and compare that to 2 peak weeks during the summer?
Yeah, this had May, June, July, 6th.
Right.
Here's a summary of other permit sales too.
That's what, I mean, we have this,
This would be
if we
the
got
one.
stats for that, we got stats for those 2 weeks. I think we look at that, and then we can maybe come to a decision, but to just listen to me and say, oh, yeah, what he sees
Well-
is true, and what you guys all hear and see is true.
So,
Statistics would be.
so the
something
way
we
to
should
move
go
this
to.
forward then, it would be to,
think
I would recommend.
I like Mark. I think we got a lot on our plate, and I think let's see what happens with the signs. Let's see what happens with the 4 hours. If we start going, we're not gonna know what had an effect
So you're saying
way or
the
the other.
recommendation perhaps is to do nothing, leave it as it is, including the,
and study it.
and study it.
For next year.
I'm,
Look back at last year's stats. I'd like to see what happens during those 2 weeks.
And I'd like to see the signage up. We need to
And
know
I'd
where
like
those
to go and
signs are
talk to
gonna
a
go.
couple hotels and find out their rates, because that's gonna determine what true peak is. I think that's a good barometer of, I mean, because if they're gonna be $100, you know that they're not selling them. I mean, they come to me and say, I need a discount to throw into a package to get people to come here. And that's in September, but it's only during the week. Weekends, we have no problem filling this place up.
all right, so
But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, into Thursday becomes a challenge.
let's try and wrap this up. Is anybody in the audience? So what I'm hearing is that we're very divided. I think there's a lot of good discussion. I think data points maybe is something we'll try and get next year. I mean, Certainly, if you look at the meter revenues, they're not as strong in September as they are in July and August, but neither is May either, so that, I mean, or June, which is, you know, you gotta wrestle with that. I'm hearing leave it and do nothing. Make the recommendation that the current season goes from Memorial Day to whatever that is, the 2 weeks after. What is it, 2 weeks?
The current one.
Two
Leave
weeks,
it
yeah, the
alone.
current, whatever it is, 2 weeks after Labor Day. But I'd be interested in hearing from anybody if anybody has any comments.
There you go. You heard from God. You heard from God. He voted for it, he voted for it.
I'm gonna get more of those, I can just see more of those slugs are coming out any minute now.
California?
All right, so I guess I need actually a motion on that and the motion would be,
I'll make a simple motion, a motion that we do not make any, that we not recommend any changes on the length of meter season for
Meter
2000,
right.
for meter season for 2021. 20.
okay? Second,
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor? Okay,
Which
So
didn't
that's
get any
good.
worse, you didn't win, it didn't
that's
get any
good.
worse, you can tell them.
That's good. All right, so those were the two issues. I hope everybody had a chance to go through this. Is there anything else on here that we need to talk about? Because this is going to get formalized a little bit. We'll send it on to the commissioners. We had compromised on the 4-hour last time.
Okay.
Changing the meter enforcement time, 9 a.m. To 10 p.m. was no change. Increase the meter cost in the core area, no change. Extend the permit season to mirror it, no change. Extend permit enforcement to mirror meter enforcement from times. We had agreed that we withdrew that recommendation. So originally our recommendation was that they should go until 10 o'clock, just like the meters. After we had a pretty long discussion last meeting, we said that we came to the conclusion that the overcrowding in the neighborhoods isn't caused by employees so much anymore as overcrowding by the homes.
Can I stop you right there? Because I had a question mark
Okay.
on that very sentence.
Okay?
If that is true, who picks up the ball on that issue?
I think that if we are still a committee next year, that the two major topics that we would be discussing would be big issues, which would be the zoning issues. That would be limiting or requiring more parking for larger houses or more bedrooms, if that, however we end up doing it.
Somehow addressing the problem.
And the issues that you've brought up is, do we begin to put restrictions on how many cars come in? Those are big issues, and I would say if this is implemented, it would probably take us the entire year next year to tackle those two issues.
Okay, and based on what you just said then I would agree with withdrawing that, as long as it doesn't die.
Yeah, please, this is it's a free-for-all at these meetings.
This whole topic area, and the data that we've seen so far that people submitted for the comprehensive development plan is one of the key issues. All the things you've just been talking about, there have been opinions that have gone from the extremes. It's going to be a very hot topic as part of the whole panoply of things that we're doing in the CDP. So it's not going to die. It's going to definitely be in the forefront.
I've said this before, and our street, I live in the 200 block of Laurel, so we're close to everything. I mean, that's, I guess, the good news. So we get a lot of the traffic that flows because we're a block or two off of where the meters and things. But I can tell you in the 20 years since we've owned that house and 15 years of living there, I don't know the exact number, but I'd have to do in my head, 10 or 12 of the houses have been torn down. What used to be the 3-bedroom cottages and are now 5, 6, and we actually have 2 of the 7 and 8 bedroom houses on the street. And that has impacted significantly because they have had 2 spaces. They're now bringing 6 cars. They're putting 4 of them on the street on Saturday morning and not moving them for the entire week. And that happens. And so when we used to be able to find a place to park And I'm sad to say that the house across the street just got torn down this week, so there's another one that's gonna happen, so that just impacts it more. So where it used to be that you could find a place up until about 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock, there is no parking, period. Now, we're impacted more than some of the outlying areas because of right where we are, but the house and the size of them and not compensating for the amount of parking is an issue. And I will say this because Randy continues to tell us, which is true, is the houses are smaller than they have to be smaller than they were 15 years ago when the zoning changed. However, people didn't tear down the houses like they are now. I mean, just look at the amount of tear downs. And it's, I mean, it's an all-time high.
Because you can't retrofit. That's the
Well,
thing.
you know, I'm not-
The reason they would, I think a lot of these people would.
We can get into that debate. The bottom line is what used to be 3 bedrooms and 2 cars is now 5 or 6 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, and 6 cars.
Another thing,
Paul, did you pay the electric bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
in relation to that, another thing that's happening in the north end that I observe is that a lot of the houses are mulching or putting crushed stone on their whole front yard, and they'll put 6 and 7 cars, what used to be a lawn, and they can get by with the current stickers that are sent to them. The prize this summer would have been a house right across the street from us, 12 cars one week. And they didn't need another permit. They got them all on the property and the 2 temporaries out in the street. So this is happening.
Okay,
The
so-
look of the neighborhoods has changed.
So the answer to that is it is being looked at. I know it was
That's
on
great.
the survey because I answered that survey and I know that question was on it. Okay. Increased cost for additional permits for rental properties and others, no change because that was implemented.
That's your 222?
No. We're way past that. We're,
Not there yet.
or not there yet, sorry. It is increased cost for
Oh,
additional permits.
Okay.
Depending on how yours printed out, it's at the bottom of the sheet. It may
Yeah,
have been.
yep, I got it now.
Okay, increased cost of business license that include parking permits. This is the one we discussed that, you know, currently the $225 or $250 permit is given when some people only pay $125 for their business license. It's ongoing by the administration. They are reviewing these on a regular basis, and I know that Sharon said she's gonna make more recommendations at this year's budget. The 222 is the next one.
Yeah.
And our recommendation is going to be to recommend that again. Extend the free permits to residents for scooters, that was implemented, so obviously there's no change. Streamline permit costs, again, I talked with Sharon, that's ongoing by the administration. You know, one of the conversations we had is that you have to make sure that if you increase one, that you increase them all so that so that you're not getting a 3-day permit
Proportionally increased.
proportionally
Right.
increasing. Yeah, thanks. That was the word I was looking for. So that's ongoing. Increased permit fees. Again, it's being partially, because that's all sort of part of that process they look at every year. But what the city manager said is that they would continue to do it proportionally so that if they raise one, they raise it across the board so that it makes sense. Use technology to issue permits and enforce permits. I'm happy to announce that that's at least being looked at. You know, buying permits online instead of just at the little kiosk is something that the administration is reviewing. It's a budget item, so these are big ticket items, but it's being looked at. Create criteria and process for placement and removal of 30-minute meters. I think that's one of the issues that we've struggled with. Again, according to the city manager, they are continuing to look at it. But just as the one before, I emphasized in our recommendation that it needs to be enacted fully, not just looked at. Evaluate current location of the 30-minute meters and remove, move, and add as needed. It is ongoing, but I believe that, as we talked about, it needs to be enacted fully.
Yeah, I think there was a discussion at one of the commissioners' workshops about the 30-minute meters and the fact that they should be all in the same place on the same block. Is that right, Paul? Somebody had said that was.
Yeah.
So they're working on it beyond us, in other words.
Yeah. Mark the 30-minute space is better so potential parkers aware before they pull in the space. Again, it's ongoing, and it needs to be enacted. I talked with Sharon again the other day, and I said, you know, one of the ways that we used to do it was, we actually had the meter a different color, but that's more difficult because we now multi-space, that was back when we had single. But you could, and it's a little bit labor intensive, but put a stripe in front of the space of a color that designates with a good education campaign.
Yeah.
Because the challenge we have right now is people pull in and then see the little sign
Pull out.
and then pull out and block up traffic. So they're looking at it, she's taking that as a recommendation, she's gonna call around to see how other people do it. But the multi-space makes it a little tougher because you can't just, like ours used to be red,
Yeah,
The wayfinding people may have some ideas on
Yeah.
that too.
yeah.
but it needs to be enacted. Evaluate scooter placement, we didn't see any real movement on it, they're, I guess, gonna continue to look at it, but, you know, we talked about finding more spaces that could be turned into it, those are sort of those two. Again, what I've been told is it's ongoing, but I think when I hear ongoing, I'm actually putting down on the thing that it needs to be enacted fully.
Randy's not here, but if you remember, he actually had taken pictures of possibilities.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
something to definitely discuss again if it doesn't change.
Along with scooters, promoting more bicycle rides. There was definite increase in the use of bicycles this season, and that's one less car.
Yeah, and I think that I've shied away from actually putting that on our recommendation because Streets and Transportation is doing the bikes. But I think that parallels with us promoting the use of scooters because you can get 4 or 5 scooters into one parking space. Require permits for all commercial vehicles, that was implemented, so there's no change. Enforce vehicle size restrictions, it was completed and I didn't fill in, I need to fix that to say no change. If you recall, it was a minor thing, but there was a sign for the longest time at the entrances that said nothing beyond 21 feet, 6 inches or something was allowed. And it was never enforced because most construction vehicles are that big, so they actually just changed the size that's allowed. Change parallel parking on King Charles and other streets where street width allows, make spaces diagonal. That was not implemented, and we talked about the fact that that still needs to be implemented. It's creating more spaces. If there's anything in here, we've talked about all these over the last couple months, but if there's anything I've missed. Locate abandoned driveways and make those legal parking spaces. Again, to your point, I think that was one of the things that Randy had also. Some were done.
I was gonna say, there was some implementation, they did go ahead and remove all the yellow spots where there was no reason for a yellow spot.
But it still needs to be fully implemented. My understanding is that Sharon said that the next 2 months are when a lot of these things could be enacted because it's sort of in between
Off-season,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah, their version of off-season. Create a public relations campaign. Whew, does that need to be implemented? Change the signage. The merge is being worked on, but it needs to be implemented.
We quickly think about changing that title.
Sure.
I mean, somehow I think we just need to have a clear, consistent, regular communication.
So create an
So-
information campaign
I
or?
don't know, I struggle with some of the words sometimes, but.
Sometimes the
Instead of public
hospitality.
relations, you mean? You don't
Yeah,
really-
communications is what we're talking about, public relations, we're not, I think what we need is.
Public education
We need a
would be better.
spokesperson for each one of the things that get passed.
So how about a
needs to be-
communication plan?
It needs to be our words, not a journalist's words, not a Facebook word, it needs to be our words that come out first and foremost. I mean, whatever we have to say to that. 'cause
Okay,
we gotta get the
you're-
first
You're
word.
addressing something different, I think. He's
Am I?
addressing, talking to the Gazette and what they put on the front page. Is that what
Well,
you're?
no, I think a
I think it
communication
goes
plan.
both ways. I think it's all encompassing.
I like
One is
communication.
the announcement of what we're doing, and then the other is a continued effort of communicating
Right.
to all
Parties.
stakeholders
Yeah, right.
in
So,
that.
so one of the challenges, and I'm throwing out communication plan, tell me if you think, but one of the challenges is gonna be, this is gonna be part of the record as of December 9th at the workshop. If we don't have the whys behind this,
Yeah.
it's going to become the newspaper and the Facebook and people sending letters and whatever. So I think it's a communication plan, and I will talk with both the mayor and city manager about, trying to make sure that the rationale that's in here, and I can expand these a little bit more,
Is
goes with it so that,
Absolutely.
because otherwise it'll be like last time where everybody was up in arms and complaining about everything before they even understood why the stuff was being.
Right, and so I'd like it to be not more than just a PR campaign. I think it needs to be
Do you like
I struggle
Would you
communication
like
plan?
communication?
Communication and education?
No, we don't want to educate, we want to communicate.
Communication plan, an ongoing?
strategy. Strategy's good. I mean, I like to.
I like plan. Strategy is like you think about it. Plan is you do something. I will add stuff into the rationale on that a little bit.
Okay.
So
Just something,
that
I just, I
No, I
think
like,
needs a
you're,
little more.
change street signage to be more strategic. That's obviously being implemented with the merge, which I keep spelling wrong. M-E-R-J-E? Did I get that right?
GE.
G-E? M-E-R-G-E. J-E. That's what I thought.
Merge?
It's not merge as in merge into lane of traffic.
Sorry.
Yeah. Enhance the city website with parking information. You know, we've talked about this, interactive maps, apps, all sorts of things. The city is recommending that they wait for the completion of the sign program and then implement that. And I think they're reviewing their whole website. But ultimately, it would be nice if we would be into the 21st century like everybody else, where I can pull up an app, I can go to the city map and have an interactive map to know where the longer term meters and short term. So I think that's a next year recommendation. I mean, it's a recommendation, but. And I think that was it.
Linda, you didn't make any changes in where those meters are located. That remains the same.
Correct.
So, okay.
Yeah, so the truth of it is, after 9 months of meetings, we haven't changed a whole lot,
But we're surer about it now.
but we're sure about it. That's a good way to put it.
We know about, we did the 4-hour. And we're,
Yeah.
Yeah, got that.
And there's a lot of this stuff that we didn't change our position,
That's my point
but
is,
it's nothing happened before.
a lot of so I guess what I'm saying is after a year of studying this and a year of talking and a year of gathering input, we apparently had some pretty good ideas a year ago
Right.
because we're continuing to promote them.
Exactly.
Do you have any thoughts coming in? Keep throwing you under the bus, you know, that's what I'm good at.
No, I really don't have anything
too can
in
get a token.
closing. I appreciate that this was so well organized and allowed me to feel like I'm getting caught up and doing it pretty quickly.
Well, it's, you know, as I said, it's a small committee, but I have to compliment all of you because as you've learned, parking is an emotional issue and nobody wants to take ownership of it. It makes you the least favorite at the cocktail parties. And yet it's one of the more important things, and I've said it before, it's part of economic development, and without it, they go hand in hand, so I compliment this group. I don't know that we'll meet again for a couple months because we will be presenting this. The only thing I would say to that is we may want to meet prior to the first time this gets put into action items at the committee level, and I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, so I guess stay tuned. But, you know, we typically kind of slide for the next couple months while it gets implemented. I would encourage everybody, though, at any time, I mean, the 9th is when we get our 15 minutes that I'll, you know, make a very quick presentation with a couple slides and sort of the hows and whys, but after that, once it starts getting debated at the workshop level, we should try and make sure that one of us is always present at those as to speak, because there's always questions and things. So, and you know, I'll try and make myself as available as possible, but anybody else, that would be great too.
What's December 9th?
December 9th is a workshop meeting where it starts at 9. We could be on at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock. So.
Actually, we're usually on anyhow. I mean,
It's one of the earlier
it's
ones,
one of the
yes.
earlier ones usually,
It's
yes.
gonna be part of the report, so. So before we close up, anything from anybody in the public? You've been sitting here you have any?
No.
Okay. And, you know, we appreciate any input from anybody. You guys, anything?
Only that next year, perhaps we'll talk a little bit about the park and ride, right, as a project for next year.
All right, let me do,
It sort of come to our attention that we're city subsidizing the park and ride, and that if we're not getting good results, because of what we heard from the businesses at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, was that, might as well not have it because it doesn't work. Well, if it doesn't work, why we have it? So it's something I think we have to talk about in depth and get some feeling on it. Just a thought for next year. Yes, sir.
They are working.
yeah,
Just an update on the park and ride. As of this coming season, the Rehoboth lot will be free. It will no longer be a charge. And so I think the city manager and a representative of DART will be speaking about the subsidy.
That's huge.
We were giving a subsidy to the workers, but now that subsidy needs to be pushed somewhere else.
Somebody's working on it then, which is
Yes.
good, right?
great.
Good.
Whoever did that, great.
And we don't need to.
Fabulous.
Somebody else already has.
That's DART did it. But before, it used to be, you park for $10 and you get 4 passes to go back and forth. Now you'll park for free
But you have to pay.
and your passes will be, I think, $4.20 round trip. So in essence, from a car of 4, it's more expensive, for the visitor. And then also for the employee can park there for free, and the employee will also be $4.20. That's conceivably where we could provide the subsidy, because we were providing the subsidy before of about $2. So it could equal itself out there, but it may, I think what DART is trying to do is push the lot, so to get more cars outside than inside. But that matches what they've done in Lewis, because in Lewis, it's free parking as well. And I think, and another thing that they said about DART was, throughout the state, I think the ridership was up about 16%. And I think in the Lewis and Rehoboth area was 10, 12, 14%, something like that, for the routes.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
During that meeting that we had, the chamber meeting that we had, it was brought to our attention that the workers, if they parked out at Lewis, yes, it was free and they could come in, but the time it took them, it was adding like an hour to their time frame to get in or to get back to their vehicle. So they cooperated. DART came forward and said, we'll make this one free, they're closer, that way they can come in, park, they can get back to their car.
That needs to really be pushed then,
That's a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
because that's huge, because
Yes.
again,
Oh, yes.
less
That was
cars.
the complaint, yeah. Yeah.
So it's very cooperative.
Everyone that rides
How
that
about
is one less
the-
car to park.
How about the last day of the meters?
Last day.
They didn't do park and ride
The permits, it was the permits.
for the permits? Well, it was the same day.
Yeah, but meters are
permits.
always then, but they extended the
That
permits
last day,
and
remember
park
that?
and ride stopped like a week before. Remember
No, it was
they,
just that Sunday.
somebody made that comment at the meeting.
I wasn't aware of that.
Do you know?
They're in the process of determining a way to push it so that they provide that service longer.
Okay,
I think they stopped the Monday after Labor Day.
That's what I think.
And I think what they're trying to do, because it was emphasized in the meeting, that the meters and the permits went till 2 Sundays afterwards. And so what they were trying to do was maybe put in what they were doing throughout the summer,
for those, okay.
So if we had to, because we were talking about extending the times, we would have to work with probably DART for extending their service for that too.
There's your
correct?
communication plan.
Yeah, but except we didn't for this year, so.
Right, I'm saying if as we think about it going forward,
Yep.
we need to add that to our thought process. I hadn't even thought about
Yeah,
that.
and I think that was mentioned in the meeting, that more and more people are around on those 3rd and 4th weekends in September, and there's always a possibility of things we do something,
They
they
do,
do something, or if they do something, we do something.
makes sense. All right, anybody words of wisdom?
Next meeting?
I don't think we set one at this point because we've got to wait till this plays out now through the thing, so I would say,
So it's workshop, and then after the workshop, then what?
well, after the workshop, then they start putting them into conversations at workshops,
Other future workshops?
future workshops, yeah, so this is just putting it out there. I'll try and get a schedule from Paul.
How do we know what's like the big important meeting?
I'll
That's gonna
keep.
be a commissioners meeting, that they're gonna make these decisions? or
No,
they're
so what
gonna-
happens is, well, the final decision is a commissioners meeting. They don't make decisions at the workshop, but historically, the discussion and all the pros and cons come out at the workshop. So I would suggest that once I find out from the city what their schedule is after we make this presentation, then I'll communicate with you guys on when we think the important topics are gonna come up. I mean, the best thing I can tell you is what I try and always do is subscribe to that Civic Web or whatever and get the pushes, so you get the agenda, because then you can see what's coming up. But as I get word of it, I'll let you know. They usually do these in conjunction with their budget conversations, so it will be starting. All right, anybody else from the audience? Meeting adjourned, 11:20. Keep in mind the mics are still on.
Are you going to like Antarctica or somewhere this year?
No, we're not, we're all going to Florida.
Oh, warm? You're going to warm in the winter?
Yeah.
That's not like you.
Well, the trip we're actually now looking at, I don't know if we're gonna do it or not, but the
Full-time,
trip
we're
we're
in
looking at is actually
Old
one with
Newcastle,
North Pole.
Delaware,
Okay.
but the house
More
down
your
here is on
style.
Scarborough, right around the corner from the bank.
That's okay, that's
I know,
what it's good for.
I figured, you know what, you guys could still out vote me.
Yeah. I
Our
think
Saturday
doing
night
nothing at this point.
entertainment
I
during
had
the
to
season
voice
is watching
my-
it so well.
So I was hearing all around the house.
I feel like the Statue of
I think
Liberty
it's good.
defending the
Yeah.
neighborhood, so.
And
That's
we're
why,
plotting
you
and
know,
planning our next trip. So we've looked at,
You said North Pole.
you can literally go to the North Pole and stand on the North Pole.
All right, why would you want to?
Because we've been to Antarctica,
person would want
Yeah, but you don't, you
because
can't
we've done, because we've done the other
Oh, all right.
trips. So that's one,
Obviously, with CDP.
I don't know, we've been kicking around a bunch of times.
It's on your bucket list.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, that's cool.
I don't know, we're,
But we're here a lot, so if you can't make one of these commissioners meetings, let me
yeah,
know.
well,
I'd have to go.
we
you
will
know.
be in Florida for, February, March.
The city has to be.
And a lot might get done then.
Yeah, it has in the past, you know.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Sorry to throw you in it.
No, it's okay.
This is a mild meeting. We didn't have the public yelling at us today.
Oh, that's good. That's
We've had
good.
those meetings.
I
think they want. This is the lady.
I'll do it.
See you later, Linda.
See ya.
you should always be this way.
I tried.
The face of crowded parking.
That amount of time?
Oh, I have no
I know, I wondered about that.
Oh.
They just
All right, sir, see you the next time.
take it out there, you don't have to start that.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
I think I will find
Happy
it out.
holidays to you too. Hope you're busy down there, your window's pretty.
Sharon and Paul. I volunteered. Thank you very much. Because I thought it was partial, because I thought it was.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to join, but, you know, I'm coming, I don't.
In any event,
I'm just
hi Joe, Mike Strange.
nice to meet you, thank you for your.
Well, I love this stuff. Didn't know everybody else hates it.
Well, it's not so bad. Fran. I don't have any, you can tell me the number that I have in downtown that once that facility. Give me even two. The meter times changed. I know one person that said
well.
Whole organization.
Oh, thank you.
I don't think, I know
Yeah, we
three
have our
people
new
right
newscast
there.
up and running
that want
finally.
to push back.
How
That's
are
just
you
those
going?
three.
They were testing the fire hoses earlier, so maybe part of that.
It's been that way for decades.
But we also fill our sewers
I did see that.
Okay,
and
so why
our
don't you want
restaurants.
to?
I told you, it's still free.
Well,
Yeah, of course,
The station started to fall for years.
That's gross.
Good luck.
Thank you.
oh, I think you're crazy. I could no way could I agree to that.
Yeah, yeah, so what do you need me to do? You just give me a call? Yeah. I need to do it after Thanksgiving. No, that's okay, that's fine. Because I run the Thanksgiving program at Epworth.
But I really wanted to
Up to
find,
here, we
I
keep.
really wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah.
I'll give you a call. If for some reason,
You need a large group to say that.
I would have brought
I'm
pictures.
just like I said,
Taking pictures.
Oh,
I'll call you after Thanksgiving.
say I've been here for decades too, I've seen it. I know.
See, my part, I drive them all the time. I leave them all, out through Baldwin. My office has a window out on Baldwin. Town is busy. Baltimore is got people parked on.
Harry was
Town
one.
isn't busy, and there's no, during the week, there's no one
Right,
on
but
that.
Edward was the other one.
Signage can do that too.
I don't know, but anyway,
I spent all day.
yeah, let me have her,
Because that's one of the issues that's coming up as
I'm
well.
not paying your parking ticket.
Oh,
As part of the CDP was again with the whole issue of parking and why this, why that, why not that, why not this? And all of it, most people you can tell were shooting from the hip without understanding a whole bunch of
Well,
stuff.
the frustration I have, and I mean, I appreciate Trey, but they're emotional about it, so, you know, it's so good when the meters are full, you know, I keep throwing it out, then get rid of them totally. Because they really are to promote turnover and create spaces, and so the key that I was trying to get everybody to do is, okay, so what's the season? And if we believe that the season needs turnover, then that's what the meter should be.
And the funny part was, because I wasn't on the committee, I didn't want to keep popping up. The comment that, well, there's nobody there. If there's nobody there, the meters aren't preventing this from being there, it's because nobody's there. And if you want more people, you have to use other
I'm coming, I
mechanisms.
promise.
So, it's
So,
interesting.
you know, I ran parking and transportation. So what we used to say is that, you know, people don't come downtown to park. They come for a reason. And you've got to give them the reason. I'll provide the parking, but you've got to give them the reason.
And we've got a whole bunch of other factors that are occurring external to the overthrows now, which are impacting a variety of things.
It's huge. What's going on in the highway and then all the other areas, is huge. And it's only gonna get worse because they're all built as close to the beach. You know, close to the beach, walk the beach, drive to the beach, right away from the beach, or whatever. And in fact, it's impacting. So, even though.
Oh, no,
Are you
I'm not
ready?
gonna interview her.
And it's a user fee for using our facility. I'm coming, I promise.
7 million.
Where are we going now? Here, because it's quiet?
Actually, yeah, no, we can do it in here.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yep, thank you.
Let's see, could go right here even.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna ask you, like, what was decided on in today's meeting with the permits, and then a little bit about the meter season and what was discussed, but why that's not changing?
Okay.
All right, yeah, it's working.
hope they're testing something and not that they're having an issue.
I know, so weird. All right, so first, like usual, just say spell your name for me. Oops. Oh, let's try that's being weird. Can you take a step to your left? Right. All right, so first, how many residential permit, or I didn't know how to say spell your name, sorry.
Linda Kaufman, Kauffman, and I chair the Parking Advisory Committee for the City of Rehoboth.
All right. And then what was discussed today with the parking permits? How many do people have right now? And what are you guys going to recommend to commissioners?
So the meeting today was really the wrap-up of 9 months of meeting, 10 months of meetings to come up with the recommendations for the 2020 season. And the last two pieces that we had to debate today were the amount of permits that residents should be given for free and how many they should potentially buy, and also the meter season. So we recommended many other things, and that full report will be given to the commissioners at a workshop meeting on December 9th. And I think we covered them today, probably about 18 to 20 recommendations. The last two, as I said, were the permits and the meter season. As far as the permits, our recommendation last year was to limit the amount of permits that residents could get to 2 permanent, 2 transferable, and 2 scooter permits. All of them are free. Currently, there's an unlimited amount of permits that can be issued. And we felt before, and we affirmed it today, that we needed to limit the amount that people could be given for free. Doesn't mean they can't get more permits, it simply means how many are actually given. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One is to promote people to use their driveways more often. The second is that it's a pretty valuable commodity that is just giving away. So all of those factors will roll into it. We felt that our recommendation that we put together last year stood, and that we were going to again recommend that as became known as a 222, which was 2 permanent, 2 transferable, and 2 scooters, all free. So that was that piece. The second piece, which is probably the more pressing issue, was the meter season. We discussed whether we wanted to extend